The defense couldn't find a motive either for which a respected person like John Christie would murder two people. At the same time, the prosecution could use the explanation in Timothy's confessions as motive. Timothy had no previous convictions for violence. He had only been fined for theft and motoring offenses. But sadly, Timothy's conflicting statements undermined his credibility. Timothy took the stand in his own defense. He was actually the only witness called by his defense. Again, he denied killing Beryl and Geraldine, sticking to the version of events in his second confession. He further testified that he only became aware of his daughter's death when he was told about this by the police. Asked why he confessed to killing his family, Timothy said, "When I found out about my daughter being dead, I was upset and I did not care what happened to me then." The case largely came down to John's word against Timothy's. The trial lasted for only 3 days, and a lot of key evidence was left out or never even shown to the jury. So, Timothy Evans was found guilty, the jury reaching the decision in only 35 minutes. There was an appeal, but this appeal failed. This was held before the Lord Chief Justice, Lord Goddard, Mr. Justice Sellers, and Mr. Justice Humphreys on 20th of February. In the end, Timothy was executed by hanging on 9th of March 1950 by Albert Pierpoint, assisted by Sid Durnley at Pentonville Prison. 3 years later, the safety of Timothy's conviction was severely criticized when John's murders were discovered. During interviews with police and psychiatrists before his execution, John Christie admitted several times that he was responsible for the murder of Beryl Evans, Thomas's wife. If this was true, then Timothy's second statement detailing John's offer to abort Beryl's baby is likely to be the true version of events. Ludovic Kennedy, who was cited in the handbook that I mentioned earlier, provided one possible reconstruction of how the murder took place, saying that Beryl, she let John into her flat expecting the abortion to be carried out, but she was instead attacked and then strangled. John claimed to have possibly engaged in sexual intercourse with Beryl's body after her death, but he claimed to be unable to remember specific details. However, Beryl's post-mortem didn't find any evidence of sexual intercourse. In his confessions to Beryl's death, John denied that he agreed to carry out an abortion on Beryl. He instead claimed that he strangled her while intimate with her, or that she wanted to commit suicide and he helped her do it. Very credible, right? Something really important was not even mentioned in Timothy's trial. The two workmen, they were willing to testify that there were no bodies in the wash house when they worked there several days after Timothy was alleged to have hidden them. These workmen stored their tools in the washroom, which was a small outhouse measuring 54 by 52 inches or 140 by 130 centimeters, and they cleaned it out completely when they finished their work on 11th of November. But the workmen were never called to give evidence. Instead, the police re-interviewed them and forced them to change their evidence to fit the theory that Timothy was the murderer. John Christie, after everything, he actually ended up losing his job in the post office as a result of his criminal record being made public in court, and he struggled to find another job. Running out of money, he fraudulently sublet his flat in March 1953 and disappeared with the rent. After John left the flat, the landlord allowed an upstairs tenant, Beresford Brown, to use John's kitchen. And what a surprise comes next. Removing the wallpaper, Beresford found the bodies of 3 women, Kathleen Maloney, Rita Nelson, and Hectorina McLennan, hidden in a papered over kitchen pantry, a small space immediately next to the wash house where Beryl and Geraldine Evans were found. So, I think it's safe to say that John hid Beryl's and Geraldine's body in that same tiny space until the workmen left and then placed their bodies in the wash house. A further search of the building and the grounds turned up three more bodies. John's wife Ethel, under the floorboards of the front room, Ruth Fürst, an Austrian nurse and munitions worker, and Muriel Edie, a former colleague of John Christie, who were both buried in the right-hand side of the small back garden of the building. John Christie even used one of their thigh bones to prop up a trellis in the garden, which, like I said, the police missed in their earlier searches of the property. So eventually, John Christie, he was arrested on 31st of March 1953, and during the course of the interrogation, he confessed 4 separate times to killing Beryl Evans. He never admitted killing baby Geraldine, however. He confessed to murdering Ruth Fürst and Muriel Edie, saying that he stored their bodies in the washroom before he buried them in shallow graves in the garden, which again was missed at the first search. It was in the same washroom that the bodies of Beryl and Geraldine were found during the investigation into their murders. John Christie was found guilty of murdering his wife, and in the end he was hanged on 15th of July 1953 by Albert Pierpoint, the same hangman who executed Timothy Evans at the same prison just 3 years before. With his hands tied behind him, John complained as the noose was being lowered around his neck that his nose was itching. "It won't bother you for long," replied his hangman. Gosh, I can't even believe that I'm saying this. I mean, you are about to be hanged and you are complaining that your nose is itching? What kind of twist is this that? Oh gosh. Because John's crimes, they raised doubts about Timothy's guilt in the murders of his wife and daughter. The serving Home Secretary, David Maxwell Fyfe, commissioned an inquiry to investigate the possibility of a miscarriage of justice. It was chaired by the Recorder of Portsmouth, John Scott Henderson, King's Counsel. This inquiry lasted 1 week, and guess what? The findings upheld Timothy's guilt in both murders, with the explanation that John's confessions of murdering Beryl Evans were unreliable because they were made in the context of supporting his defense that he was insane. Obviously, this didn't go well with the media and the public, because if John's confessions were unreliable, why should those of Timothy be acceptable, right? The inquiry ignored vital evidence and led to even more questions in Parliament, especially from Geoffrey Byng, Reginald Paget, Sidney Silverman, Michael Foot, and many other MPs. The murder of Beryl Evans was never a primary charge in the trials of either Timothy Evans or John Christie. Timothy had been charged with the murder of his daughter and John with the murder of his wife. I don't know how it makes sense, but okay. By the late 1940s, capital punishment was becoming a major controversy in Britain. Just a year before Timothy's execution, the House of Commons heard during a debate that the only way an innocent man could conceivably be hanged would be if the police, the attorneys, the judge, and the jury had all gone collectively mad.